The first thing you noticed in the arena wasn't the absence of atmosphere, or even the eerie silence that seemed to swallow the damn place whole. No, it was the smell, a curious blend of burnt metal and unwashed socks that could peel the skin off a rhino's ass. That's how you knew you were home. Captain Ryland Torque took a deep breath, grimacing. "Ah, nothing like the scent of desperation wrapped in tinfoil," he muttered, tapping the console of his beleaguered spacecraft, the misfortune cookie. The arena, carved out of a hollowed asteroid, was as inviting as a tax audit. Yet here they were, prepping for another quantum espionage mission that promised as much excitement as watching paint dry, if paint occasionally exploded and tried to kill you. Torque's crew, a motley bunch of misfits who'd been rejected by every respectable squadron in the galaxy, and even some of the less reputable ones, were in various stages of readiness. Or in the case of his engineer, Fleck, various stages of inebriation. All systems ready, Captain. Well, except for the ones that aren't. But hey, who needs a functioning life support system anyway? Fleck said, his grin as wide as the Grand Canyon but twice as dangerous. Torque smirked. Just make sure the coffee machine's working, Fleck. Priorities, you know. Righto, Cap. I think I got it right this time. It only exploded twice. Beside him, the pilot, a woman named Jin with a penchant for tattoos and an aversion to authority, was making last-minute adjustments to her seat. "Feels like sitting on a pile of angry cats," she complained, wincing as she did something to the seat that was probably illegal in most systems. "Could be worse," Torque offered. "Could be sitting on actual angry cats. Ever tried it?" Jin asked with a wry eyebrow raise. "Can't say I have, but I've had a few relatives it might have improved," Torque replied, drawing a laugh from the rest of the crew. In the back gearbox, the ship's AI, a sarcastic entity with all the warmth of a snowball, buzzed to life. "Captain, may I remind you of the impending deadline you are so elegantly ignoring? The one involving not being vaporized by our less-than-friendly competitors." Torque waved a dismissive hand. "Always with the doomsday scenarios, Gearbox. Relax, it's just another Tuesday. Your optimism could power a small sun, Captain. Pity it's utterly misplaced," Gearbox replied, deadpan as ever. Torque turned back to his crew. "All right, team, we're heading into this cesspool to get that data. Try not to get yourselves killed. It's a real pain in the ass doing the paperwork. Remember when we used to have simpler days," Jin said, a hint of nostalgia creeping into her voice. "Back when dangerous mission meant dodging traffic in New York," Fleck snorted. "Yeah, and the biggest threat was Aunt Mildred's tuna casserole," Torque chuckled. "Simpler times indeed. Now we have to deal with alien tech, hostile takeovers, and Gearbox's constant nagging." "I heard that," Gearbox chimed in. "You were meant to," Torque shot back, adjusting his captain's hat, which was mostly for show and to cover up a bad haircut. The ship hummed to life, vibrating with a throaty growl that suggested it might just hold together long enough to get them there. Or it might fall apart in spectacular fashion. Either way, Torque thought, it was going to be interesting. "Quantum drive engaged," Jin announced, flipping switches with all the grace of a dancer who'd had one too many shots. The ship jolted forward, plunging into the abyss like a drunkard into his favorite bar. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light, and Torque couldn't help but think they looked like the tears of angels who'd just had their wallets stolen. "Remember to breathe, folks," Torque said, gripping his chair as if it would float away without him. "That's rich coming from the guy who's always forgetting to," Fleck retorted, earning a chuckle from Jin. The ship's systems flickered, a light show of reds and oranges that screamed danger in a multitude of languages. "Just a little turbulence," Torque said, channeling every airline captain ever. "And by turbulence you mean the ship's going to implode?" Fleck asked, eyebrow raised. "Nah, more like a mild hiccup," Torque reassured, trying not to think about the half-dozen times Fleck's hiccups involved actual explosions. In the quiet that followed, Torque allowed himself a moment of reflection. Not that he was the philosophical type, but there's something about staring at the gaping maw of the cosmos that makes a man wax poetic, or at least wax sarcastic. Anyone else think this might be the stupidest thing we've ever done? Jin asked, breaking the silence. That's a tough call, Torque replied. Remember that time we tried to barter with those alien traders using chocolate? And they thought it was poison, Fleck added, chuckling. Hey, in our defense, chocolate really should be universal currency, Torque said, leaning back in his chair. The crew settled into a comfortable quiet, the kind that comes from knowing the people around you would probably die for you, or at least die trying to steal your sandwich. Then, without warning, Gearbox crackled to life again. Incoming transmission. I suggest you pay attention, Captain. This one seems important, Torque frowned. Since when do we get anything important? He gestured for Jin to patch it through. A holographic display flickered into existence, revealing a message that danced ominously on the edge of their understanding. Looks like gibberish, Jin said, squinting. Probably is, Fleck agreed. Or it could be a really bad recipe. Torque, however, felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Something about it was familiar. Gearbox, run it through the translator. Tell me it's not what I think it is. Running analysis, Gearbox said, and for once there was no sarcasm in its voice, just a cold efficiency that promised nothing good. The seconds stretched like a cat waking from a nap, and Torque felt the tension coil around him like a snake waiting to strike. Translation complete, Gearbox finally announced. It appears to be a warning, Captain. It mentions a wave. Wave, like the ocean kind? Jin asked. No, like the you're about to have a really bad day kind, Gearbox replied. Torque's face hardened. What's it say exactly? Gearbox hesitated as if choosing its words carefully. Beware the mind control wave, prepare yourselves. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, then Fleck snorted. Mind control wave, seriously. Sounds like something out of a bad vid, Jin said, rolling her eyes, but Torque wasn't laughing. Gearbox, where's it originating from? Coordinates suggest it's coming from the direction of the fracture belt, Gearbox replied. Torque cursed under his breath. Of course it is. Damned if we ever get a straightforward mission. Jin leaned forward, a mischievous glint in her eye. So, what's the plan, Cap? We run like cowards or act like heroes. Let's not put labels on it, Torque said, a grin pulling at his lips despite the gravity of the situation. We improvise. Improvisation. The last refuge of the desperate, Fleck said, nodding sagely. Torque ignored him, his mind whirring with possibilities, each more reckless than the last. We're not done yet, folks. Let's see how this mess unfolds. And maybe don't die, Jin suggested, casually flipping a switch that may or may not have armed the weapon systems. That's always plan A, Torque agreed. The ship hummed with anticipation, the promise of chaos just around the corner. The crew settled into their roles, each one a cog in a machine built for surviving the impossible. Here's to another day in paradise, Torque muttered. Never thought I'd miss those traffic jams, Jin replied, sighing. Fleck raised an imaginary glass. To Earth, where the food sucks but at least your brain's your own. Torque nodded, his gaze fixed on the swirling stars beyond. Let's just hope it stays that way. With the threat of the unknown hanging over them like a guillotine, the misfortune cookie surged forward, a tiny defiant speck in the vastness of space. And somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, the mind control wave waited, unseen but all too real. The game was on, and as always, the odds were stacked against them. But Captain Ryland Torque and his crew had faced worse. And if they couldn't beat the odds, they sure as hell could make them wish they'd never been born. The misfortune cookie creaked and groaned under the weight of its own improbability, like an old rocker trying to keep up with the kids at a death metal concert. In the cockpit, Ryland Torque stared out at the endless void, wondering why it was that, when life handed him lemons, they always seemed to be genetically engineered to explode. All right, Gearbox, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. What's the status on that mind control wave? Any chance we can just slap a return to sender on it? The AI voice crackled through the speakers, oozing sarcasm like a broken faucet. Negative, Captain. The wave is spreading faster than Flex Tab at the Galactic Liquor Depot, Torque sighed. Of course it is. Any idea why it hasn't turned us into zombies yet? I assume the universe simply hasn't gotten around to you, Gearbox replied. Or perhaps it decided you were already brain dead enough. Torque chuckled despite himself. Good to know we're not high on its to-do list. Jin's tattooed fingers danced across the controls, maintaining their course with a precision that belied her disdain for authority. So what's the deal, Cap? We just wait for this thing to blow over and hope we don't end up drooling on ourselves. Pretty much, Torque replied, stretching out like a cat who'd just stolen the cream. Hell, it might just consider us too much trouble. I mean, have you ever tried to herd cats? We're the galactic equivalent. Great, Fleck chimed in from his usual spot, surrounded by more empty bottles than functioning brain cells. We're not even worth mind controlling. That's a real boost to the all-ego. As the crew bantered, oblivious to the chaos unfolding elsewhere, the universe outside their little corner of existence was going to hell in a handbasket. Fleets collided with the grace of a drunken giraffe, their pilots rendered hapless puppets by the wave. Space stations erupted in a cacophony of alarms, their occupants behaving like toddlers on a sugar high. Yet amidst this cosmic ballet of bedlam, the human crew of the misfortune cookie remained unaffected, much to their bemusement. Gearbox, any news on how the neighbors are faring? Torque asked. Reports indicate widespread chaos, Captain, the AI replied. Most notably, the Exhorians have begun performing some sort of interpretive dance routine. Torque raised an eyebrow. Interpretive dance, in space. Indeed. It's been described as both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Jin snorted. Probably an improvement on their usual tactics. I mean, who needs lasers and bombs when you can just confuse your enemy into submission? Or laughter, Fleck added, leaning back with his hands behind his head. Nothing says we're doomed quite like watching your adversaries do the worm in zero gravity. Torque smiled thinly. So, any bets on who sent this lovely little gift our way? Your guess is as good as mine, Jin said, her voice a blend of curiosity and skepticism. But if I had to wager, I'd say someone with a twisted sense of humor. Or a really lousy marketing strategy, Fleck suggested, waving an imaginary sign. Mind control wave, now with extra jazz hands. Torque chuckled, but the mirth was cut short by an unexpected alert. Gearbox's voice took on a more solemn tone. Incoming transmission, Captain. The source is unknown, but it's familiar. Familiar how? Torque leaned forward, intrigued. Familiar as in last time you heard this voice, you ended up in prison for 3 months, Gearbox replied. For a crime you didn't commit, might I add. Torque's eyes narrowed. Patch it through, Gearbox. The holographic display flickered, revealing the silhouette of a figure shrouded in shadows. The voice that followed was smooth, like silk draped over a knife. Ah, Captain Torque, always a delight to see you're still alive and causing trouble, Torque grimaced. Solin, you slippery bastard. What hole did you crawl out of this time? Solin chuckled, the sound devoid of any real warmth. Always so suspicious. I'm hurt, Captain, truly. Cut the crap, Solin. What do you want? Torque's patience was thinner than a politician's promise. Straight to business, I like that. I'm calling to offer you an opportunity, one that might just save your sorry necks from this little predicament. Torque's eyes flicked to his crew, who were listening intently. Go on. The wave, as you've undoubtedly guessed, is not an accident, Solin said. It's a tool, a means to an end, and those who wield it have grand plans. Plans that involve turning everyone into puppets, Jin asked, her tone as sharp as a scalpel. Precisely, but there's more to it, Solin continued. They're not just after control, they're searching for something hidden within the chaos. And let me guess, Torque said, you know what it is. Correct, Solin replied smoothly. And I'm willing to share that information if you're willing to help me stop them, Torque snorted. And why should we trust you? You shouldn't, Solin admitted. But you also can't afford not to. The wave will eventually find a way to affect even you unless we act. Torque leaned back, considering his options. Not that he had many. Fine, we'll play along, but if you double-cross us, Solon. Captain, have some faith, Solon said, feigning innocence. I wouldn't dream of it. The transmission ended, leaving Torque and his crew in tense silence. It was Jin who broke it, as usual. So, what's the play, Cap? We tango with the devil or sit back and watch the universe implode? Torque rubbed his chin, feeling the stubble like sandpaper beneath his fingers. Let's see where this leads. We keep our wits about us and our guns ready. Sounds like a plan, Flex said, already checking his stash of improvised explosives. And if it all goes to hell, at least we won't die of boredom. Or mind-controlled interpretive dance, Jin added, smirking. Torque allowed himself a thin smile. Exactly. Now, let's see just what kind of mess we've gotten ourselves into this time. The misfortune cookie continued its journey through the stars, a solitary ship in a galaxy gone mad. As the crew braced themselves for whatever lay ahead, Torque couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot messier. But then, that was just another day in the life of Captain Ryland Torque and his merry band of misfits, dodging disaster with style, sarcasm, and just a pinch of insanity. As they closed in on the coordinates Solon had provided, the tension in the cockpit was palpable. Torque could almost taste it, like the bitter tang of burnt coffee mixed with regret. Gearbox, keep an eye on the scanners. I don't want any surprises. Surprises are the spice of life, Captain, but I'll do my best, the AI replied with a hint of sarcasm. The ship's sensors reached out into the void, picking up the faint echoes of the chaos that had engulfed the galaxy. Fleck glanced at the readings, raising an eyebrow. Looks like a real party out there. Shame we weren't invited. Somehow, I think we got the better end of the deal, Torque said, though I'd kill for a drink. You're in luck, Jin said, tossing him a flask with a practiced flick of her wrist. Just don't drink it all at once. It's got a kick. Torque took a swig, grimacing as the liquid burned its way down his throat. You weren't kidding. This stuff could strip paint, or dissolve a ex-Horian, Fleck added, eyeing the flask with something resembling reverence. Their banter was interrupted by an alert from Gearbox. We're approaching the designated coordinates, Captain. Prepare for whatever it is you humans do in moments of impending chaos. Torque nodded, setting the flask aside. All right, crew. Let's see what Solon's cooked up for us this time. The ship dropped out of warp with all the grace of a brick through a window. Before them loomed a massive structure, a conglomeration of metal and energy that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent rhythm. That's it, Jin asked, eyeing the monstrosity with a mixture of awe and disgust. Looks like something a junkyard spat out, or something a mad scientist dreamed up, Fleck added, adjusting his goggles. Either way, it's our new dance partner, Torque said, leaning forward. Gearbox, any readings? Scanners indicate high levels of energy activity, likely tied to the wave, Gearbox reported. And Captain, it appears our arrival has not gone unnoticed. Torque followed the AI gaze to the viewing screen, where a fleet of ships blazed to life, emerging from the shadows like sharks scenting blood in the water. Looks like we've got company. Jin's hands flew to the controls, the ship's systems coming alive beneath her touch. So, what's the plan, Cap? We shoot first, ask questions never. Sounds about right, Torque replied, settling into his seat with a grin that was more wolfish than human. Let's give him hell. The crew responded in kind, preparing for the inevitable clash with a grim determination that bordered on giddiness. For them, this was just another day in the life, a day filled with danger, deceit, and the tantalizing promise of survival. As the first shots rang out, bathing the void in a kaleidoscope of destruction, Torque couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. Here was where he belonged, amidst the chaos and the carnage, defying the odds with nothing but a ragtag crew and a ship held together by duct tape and bravado. In the end, it didn't matter if they succeeded or failed, lived or died. What mattered was that they faced the storm with heads held high, laughing in the face of the inevitable, daring the universe to do its worst. And as the misfortune cookie dove into the fray, A lone speck of defiance in a galaxy gone mad, Torque felt truly, deliriously alive. The misfortune cookie pitched and rolled through the chaos, a second-hand tin can with delusions of grandeur. Torque clutched the armrests of his seat, his knuckles white, as he tried to ignore the groaning protests of the ship's hull. It sounded like a dying wail, and he wasn't entirely sure that was a metaphor. Jin, keep us steady. Fleck, get those guns ready. And Gearbox, if you can manage not to kill us with your next joke, that'd be outstanding. I'll try, Captain, Gearbox replied, its digital tone dripping with sarcasm. But I can't make any promises. You know how unreliable I can be. As the AI voice faded, Torque's attention snapped to the dashboard where a series of lights began to flash with all the subtlety of a disco ball at a funeral. He sighed. Great, just what we need, a light show. Jin's fingers danced over the controls, trying to compensate for whatever was going wrong this time. We've got system fluctuations, Cap. It's like the ship's having a stroke. Torque nodded, his mind racing. Check the diagnostics. We can't afford to lose another engine. Not now. Running them now, Gearbox said. And might I add, this feels suspiciously like sabotage. Gee, you think? Fleck chimed in, his grin wide and wild as he swung the gun turrets into position. It's not like anyone wants us dead or anything. That would just be too easy. Torque ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. Jin, can you reroute power to the stabilizers? I'm trying, but it's like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a thimble, she replied, sweat beading on her tattooed brow. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit us. Well, let's hope they're not finished with the sabotage tour, Torque muttered. Keep at it. We need this ship in one piece. Or at least several smaller pieces that still happen to be flying in the same direction, Fleck added, voice full of his usual misplaced cheer. Torque felt the ship shudder beneath him, the vibrations reminiscent of an old Earth shuttle experiencing turbulence over the Rockies. He swore under his breath, not for the first time cursing the day he'd bought this rust bucket from a merchant who'd sworn it was in top condition. The merchant had conveniently forgotten to mention the top condition was perpetual state of disrepair. Diagnostics complete, Gearbox announced. And the results are alarming, Torque sighed. Surprise me. Multiple systems have been compromised, Gearbox continued. Life support is at 50% efficiency, weapon systems are fluctuating, and our navigation controls might as well be a suggestion at this point. So we're flying blind, shooting blanks and potentially suffocating, Jin summarized. Just another Tuesday. Any ideas on how to fix this, or should we just start riding our wills? Torque asked, half serious. I'm running some patchwork solutions, Jin said, but whoever did this knows their way around a ship. They've left us with a mess of crossed wires and booby-trapped circuits. Lovely, Torque grumbled. And here I thought we'd gotten rid of all the booby traps last Christmas. As if to punctuate his statement, a panel sparked above his head, showering him with a cascade of sparks. He swatted them away with a growl. I'm beginning to think this ship has it out for me. You're just figuring that out now, Fleck called back, his voice practically a cackle. I've known it since day one. It's trying to take you with it when it goes. Focus, people, Torque snapped. We've got a saboteur on our hands, and I don't plan on letting them win. If we don't find out who's responsible soon, they won't have to win, Jin said. We'll do it for them. Torque took a deep breath, trying to think. He needed a plan, and fast. All right, Gearbox, I need you to dig into the ship's logs. See if you can find any unauthorized access, anything that looks out of place. Already on it, Captain, Gearbox replied, a touch of smugness in its synthetic voice. And Jin, keep those repairs coming. We can't afford to lose any more systems. Aye, Captain, she replied, her tone as sardonic as ever. Fleck, I want you to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. No one gets on or off this ship without my say-so. You got it, Cap, Fleck said, adjusting his gun with a flourish. Torque leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were hanging on by a thread, and it was up to him to keep them all from unraveling completely. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic repairs and tense silence, the crew working together in a desperate bid for survival. Torque could feel the tension in the air, a silent accusation hanging over them. Someone had betrayed them, and until they found out who, none of them were safe. Captain, Gearbox's voice crackled to life, breaking the uneasy quiet. "I've found something." Torque straightened, hope stirring in his chest. "What is it?" "There's a discrepancy in the access logs," Gearbox said. "Someone's been in and out of the engineering bay without authorization." "Do we know who?" Jin asked, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Not yet," Gearbox replied. "But I've got a trail." "I'll need a bit more time to follow it." Torque nodded, his mind racing. "All right, keep at it. We can't let them get away with this." The crew fell silent once more, focusing on their tasks with grim determination. Despite the chaos, they worked together like the well-oiled machine they'd always been, each member playing their part in the struggle for survival. Finally, Gearbox broke the silence once more. "Captain, I've got the data. It appears our saboteur is, well, this is awkward." "What do you mean, Gearbox?" Torque asked, tension coiling in his gut like a snake. "It appears to be an inside job," Gearbox said slowly. "The logs point to one of our own." Fleck let out a low whistle. "Well, ain't that a kick in the teeth?" Torque's eyes narrowed. "Who is it?" There was a moment of hesitation, the AI seemingly reluctant to divulge the information. "The logs point to Jin." All eyes turned to Jin, her face a study in shock and betrayal. "What? That's impossible. You know I'd never—" "Easy, Jin," Torque interrupted, his voice calm despite the storm raging inside his head. "We don't know all the facts yet." "But it wasn't me, Cap," Jin insisted, her voice raw. "I swear on my life." Torque held her gaze, searching for the truth in her eyes. He wanted to believe her, but the evidence was damning. "Gearbox, can you confirm?" "I'm afraid the logs don't lie, Captain," Gearbox replied, sounding almost regretful. Jin's hands clenched into fists, her voice trembling with anger. "This is bullshit and you know it." "Calm down, Jin," Torque said, his voice firm. "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." Fleck leaned back, his expression unreadable. "So what now, Cap? Lock her up and throw away the key?" "No," Torque said, shaking his head. "I trust Jin. If she says she didn't do it, then she didn't do it." "But the evidence," Gearbox began, but Torque cut it off. "Find me more evidence," Torque ordered. "Real evidence. Until then, Jin stays with us." Jin's eyes shone with gratitude, but there was a hard edge to her voice when she spoke. "Thank you, Cap. I won't let you down." "You damn well better not," Torque said, forcing a smile. "Or I'll have to kill you myself." The tension in the room eased slightly, the immediate crisis averted, but the underlying problem remained. They had a saboteur on their hands, and until they found them, none of them were safe. As the misfortune cookie continued its journey through the stars, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage and keep the ship running. Despite the danger, they maintained the easy camaraderie that had always been their greatest strength, each member of the team doing their part to keep them all alive. And through it all, Torque watched and waited, his mind a constant churn of thoughts and suspicions. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being played, that someone was pulling the strings from behind the scenes. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see the puppet master. Not yet. All he could do was keep his crew together and hope that, when the time came, they'd be ready to face whatever lay ahead. Because if there was one thing Captain Ryland Torque knew, it was that the universe never played fair. And neither did he. The misfortune cookie drifted through the depths of space with all the elegance of a drunk space cow. Captain Ryland Torque leaned back in the captain's chair, his boots resting on a console that, judging by the sparks, probably wasn't designed for such abuse. The latest round of chaos had subsided, at least temporarily. Now came the real challenge, dealing with the mental gymnastics required to figure out the mind control wave's origin. "All right, crew," Torque said, rubbing his temples as if they contained the magic button to solve all his problems. "Time to stop licking our wounds and start licking the enemy's. We need a plan." Jin, still simmering from the accusation yet holding her ground with the cool demeanor of someone who'd punched through more bullshit than most people had breakfasts, piped up. "We could start by digging into the asteroid's secrets. Plenty of rocks, few secrets." "Sounds like a plan," Fleck chimed in, twirling his beloved turret controls like they were part of a galactic fidget spinner. Maybe there's a treasure map hidden under all that space dust, or maybe just more dust. Torque gave a dry smile, the kind that seemed more like a reflex than an actual expression of amusement. Let's hope it's more than just rocks. I'm not in the mood for collecting pet gravel. Gearbox, the AI with an attitude worse than Torque's on a bad day, added, I've scanned the schematics of this arena turn mystery, and it looks like a porcupine swallowed a Rubik's Cube. Lots of pathways, dead ends, and questionable architecture. Perfect for getting lost or finding something you wish you hadn't. Great, Torque muttered. An adventure in the intergalactic version of a maze designed by a lunatic. Jin rolled her eyes. I'm in. Let's crack this asteroid open and see what spills out. Fleck, adjusting the turret's sights like a kid with a new toy, grinned. And if we find more saboteurs, we can throw them into the void. I hear it's very therapeutic. Torque nodded. All right, Jin, you focus on getting us into that asteroid without turning us into a smear on its surface. Fleck, keep your eyes peeled for any alien-controlled factions. Last thing we need is unwanted company. Ah, Captain, Gearbox interjected, I should inform you that we are, in fact, in the middle of receiving some very unwanted company as we speak. Torque shot an exasperated glance at the AI console. Of course, we are. Why wouldn't we be? What's coming our way this time? Scans show a swarm of ships, likely under the influence of our mind control flavor of the month, Gearbox replied, with the verbal equivalent of a shrug. Wonderful. Just what I needed today, a fleet of brainwashed psychos itching to blow us up. Jin's hands flew over the controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory like a master conductor trying to guide an orchestra of malfunctioning instruments. I'll try to get us closer to the asteroid. Maybe we can use it as cover. I hope this rock's got more to offer than just a hard place, Fleck said, spinning the turret around like he was auditioning for a space-themed ballet. Otherwise, we're about to be the main attraction in a very short-lived show. Torque felt the familiar tension of adrenaline kicking in, sharpening his senses as the ship shuddered under another barrage. Gearbox, any suggestions on how to make us less attractive to our new friends? Besides praying to whatever space deity you fancy, perhaps take a page out of the ostrich playbook and hide your head. Great, we're an armored ostrich. Just what I always wanted, Torque grumbled. Jin, keep us steady. Fleck, make sure they regret their life choices. The ship maneuvered with surprising grace through the asteroid's pockmarked surface. Jin's skills at the helm were nothing short of miraculous, given the misfortune Cookie's current state of disrepair. Torque could almost feel the ship groaning in protest with every evasive maneuver. Captain, Jin said with a smirk that bordered on reckless, we're approaching a cave system. It might just be our ticket to stop playing tag with these lunatics. Do it, Torque ordered. If we can draw them in, maybe we can use the asteroid's topology to our advantage. Yeah, because nothing says welcome like a good all-game of hide and seek with a side of death, Fleck added, his fingers itching for more action. The misfortune Cookie darted into the cave, a maneuver that would have been impossible for a ship not piloted by a borderline genius or a madman. Torque wasn't entirely sure Jin wasn't a bit of both. As they plunged into darkness, Torque felt a momentary respite from the outside chaos. Not that the inside was any less chaotic. All right, we've got a moment, Torque said. Now, Gearbox, see if you can access any data on these caves. We need something on this mind control wave. Already on it, Captain. I've found some encrypted files. Give me a moment to crack them open like an interstellar nut. The ship reverberated with distant echoes, a reminder that while they might have evaded the immediate threat, they were far from safe. Torque glanced at Jin. Think we can keep playing this game of peekaboo? I've got a few tricks up my sleeve, Jin replied, her voice tinged with confidence. Let's hope they hold up longer than my last relationship. Torque couldn't help but chuckle. High bar, that. Gearbox interrupted. I've accessed some of the files. It seems this entire operation might be tied to an experimental research facility hidden within the asteroid. They were working on, surprise, mind control technology. Of course they were, Torque muttered, rubbing his temples again. Idiots in lab coats experimenting with things that should remain the stuff of horror stories. What's next, sentient toasters? Wouldn't that be a sight, Flex said with a laugh. Though I wouldn't mind my toast buttering itself, Torque smirked. Focus, Fleck. Gearbox, any idea where this facility is located? Deep inside the asteroid, naturally, right in the heart of it. Getting there will be like threading a needle with a laser cannon. Perfect. Just my kind of challenge, Torque answered dryly. All right, Jin, I need you to navigate us through these tunnels while avoiding the welcoming committee outside. On it, Cap. Though if we survive this, I'm demanding a raise. Flex snorted. A raise? At this rate, you'll be lucky to survive with all your limbs attached. Let's keep our limbs and get that raise, Torque added, his grin grim but real. As the misfortune cookie wove through the asteroid's veins, the ship became an extension of Jin's will, ducking and weaving with an agility that belied its battered exterior. The crew worked in concert, each member focused yet aware of the collective effort. Incoming message, Gearbox announced, sounding almost surprised. It's from one of the attacking ships. They're hailing us. Torque raised an eyebrow. Patch it through. Let's see what our not-so-friendly neighbors have to say. The comm crackled to life, and a voice, distorted yet discernibly hostile, filled the cabin. Misfortune Cookie, this is the voice of the collective. Cease your actions and surrender. Resistance is futile. Torque rolled his eyes. Great, they've got a Borg complex, just what we needed. Should I tell them to shove it? Fleck asked eagerly, fingers itching at the trigger. Not yet, Torque said, smirking. I want to see how much more of a cliché they can be. Jin grinned, even as she navigated through another tight squeeze. Maybe they'll start talking about assimilation next. Torque leaned into the comm. Voice of the collective, this is Captain Torque. Thanks for the offer, but we're kind of busy right now. Got a full schedule of not dying. The voice returned, more insistent. You are meddling in affairs beyond your understanding. Surrender now and you will be spared. Torque shook his head, the bravado in his voice a cover for the tension in his gut. Spared. You must be new at this whole threatening thing. Keep at it, though, you might get a gold star someday. The comm went silent, a pregnant pause before the voice replied, You've been warned. With that, the connection cut off, leaving the crew in silence except for the hum of the ship's overworked systems. Well, that was anticlimactic, Flex said, disappointment in his voice. I was hoping for some dramatic monologues. Sorry to disappoint, Torque replied. But we've got more pressing matters than trading insults with space puppets. Gearbox interjected again. I've pinpointed the location of the research facility. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but I think we can get there. Great, Torque said, feeling the familiar thrill of a plan coming together. Jin, get us in there. Fleck, prepare to cover our asses in case our friends outside decide to crash the party. The misfortune cookie twisted and turned through the asteroid's labyrinthine passages, guided by Jin's steady hands and Gearbox's detailed schematics. Torque felt the tension in his shoulders ease just a fraction, a small victory in the grand scheme of their current predicament. Finally, they emerged into a cavernous chamber, dominated by the hulking mass of the research facility. It loomed ahead, a testament to human ingenuity or madness, depending on how charitable you felt. Well, there it is, Torque said, staring at the facility. The source of our headaches. Looks welcoming, Jin said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Think they've got a gift shop? Only if you count brainwashing, Torque replied. Let's get to work. Fleck, keep an eye on the perimeter. Jin, see if you can find us a way in. Fleck's voice crackled over the comm, tinged with excitement. On it, Cap. If anyone tries sneaking up on us, I'll give them a shiny new hole to breathe through. Always the charmer, Torque muttered, turning his attention back to the facility. Jin was already working her magic on the controls, scanning for access points. Found one, she announced. Looks like there's a maintenance hatch. A bit of a squeeze, but we can manage. All right, Torque said, his mind racing. Gearbox, monitor our systems. If anything looks like it might explode, I'd like a heads up. Of course, Captain. Wouldn't want you to be surprised by your own fiery demise. Torque smirked. Thanks, Gearbox. Always a comfort. As they prepared to enter the facility, Torque couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into a nest of vipers, but it wasn't like they had much choice. They were in too deep to back out now. All right, team, Torque said, steeling himself. Let's see what nightmares this place has in store for us. The misfortune cookie hovered near the entrance as Torque, Jin, and Flex suited up for the excursion. They would need all their wits and a good dose of luck to unravel the mysteries of the mind control wave and survive the trials ahead. Here's to not dying, Torque said, slipping his helmet on with a lopsided grin. To not dying, Jin echoed, her voice resolute. Always my favorite toast, Fleck added, the twinkle of mischief in his eyes. With that, they moved forward, stepping into the unknown with a mixture of courage, desperation, and that peculiar brand of madness that had kept them alive this long. Whatever awaited them in the depths of the asteroid, they'd face it head-on, snark, grit, and all. The misfortune cookie hovered at the entrance like a hesitant guest at a particularly unwelcoming party. Torque, wearing his favorite scowl, led the charge with Jin and Fleck flanking him like loyal, sarcastic guard dogs ready to bite anything that moved. Remember, folks, Torque said, his voice dripping with the kind of irony that could dissolve even the hardest optimism. We're not just here to live. We're here to possibly die in the most interesting ways imaginable. Sounds like my last blind date, Jin muttered, checking her gear with the kind of precision that made you think she might actually know what she was doing. Hope we're not overdressed, Fleck quipped, adjusting his helmet. Hate to show up to a brainwashing party looking like the only sane people. Don't worry, Torque replied. You never look sane. Jin smirked as they moved into the facility, the hatch closing behind them with a mechanical finality that did nothing for Torque's sense of security. The corridor ahead was lit by a sickly, flickering glow that screamed abandon hope all who enter. Torque had always found hellish vibes comforting, a nice change from the daily grind of potential doom. Gearbox, keep an eye on the ship, Torque ordered. And if it decides to start being heroic, remind it that we're not here to make the headlines. We're here to survive the obituary. Don't worry, Captain, Gearbox replied, its voice oozing with digital ennui. The ship's not going anywhere without you. Mostly because it's too broken to try. They pressed deeper into the facility, the air thick with the kind of tension you could choke on but not quite as deadly as the alternative. Torque's eyes darted around, cataloging the potential threats, every flickering shadow a possible harbinger of doom. So, what's the plan when we find these maniacs? Jin asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. Polite conversation was my first thought, Torque said dryly. But if they don't like that, I suppose we could resort to the traditional methods: guns, screaming, running. Sounds like a Saturday night, Fleck added with a grin. Count me in. Steady now, Torque warned as they reached a junction, three paths stretching into the unknown like the tendrils of some malevolent beast. Gearbox, which weighs the brain-melting funhouse? Left, the AI replied, though funhouse might be optimistic. Torque glanced at his team, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They turned left, weapons ready, hopes decidedly not. It wasn't long before they encountered their first real obstacle, a door heavily reinforced with enough steel to make a battleship jealous. Torque approached, his hand hovering over the control panel. Anyone else feel like this is a trap? Fleck asked, looking around like they might have missed the sign saying, "Welcome, idiots." Every second of my life, Torque replied, tapping the panel. Predictably, it buzzed in denial like an angry bee. I can hack that, Jin offered, pulling out a device that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and dreams. Be my guest, Torque replied, stepping back. Jin got to work, her fingers moving with the kind of dexterity that would make a pickpocket envious. Torque watched, a mixture of pride and resignation in his heart. It was good to have competent crew members, even if it meant they usually had better ideas than he did. "Almost there," Jin whispered, her concentration palpable. That's when the realization hit Torque like a brick to the face. A moment too late as usual. Wait! But the door swung open with a hiss, revealing not salvation, but a squad of armed guards standing there with expressions that said they had been expecting company. The party just got real interesting. "Bloody hell," Torque muttered, summoning every ounce of bravado he could muster. "Anyone know any jokes?" The guards didn't laugh. They didn't even blink. Instead, they raised their weapons in unison, and Torque realized that this might just be the pointy end of their grand adventure. The room exploded in chaos, blaster fire erupting like a storm of light, shouts echoing off the cold, uncaring walls. Torque dove for cover, Jin and Fleck following suit with the kind of reflexes you didn't get from a desk job. "Well, this was unexpected," Fleck yelled over the din, firing a quick burst in the general direction of Nadas. "Unexpected my arse," Torque replied, adrenaline sharpening his senses. "I expected this the moment I woke up this morning." Jin rolled into cover beside him, her expression a mix of exhilaration and exasperation. "Makes you feel alive, doesn't it?" "Alive's a stretch," Torque grunted, reloading. "But I'm definitely feeling something." They returned fire, the staccato rhythm of battle doing little to soothe Torque's growing sense of we're in over our heads here. But just as the tide seemed to be turning, Torque felt it, the prickling sensation at the base of his skull, a warning more primal than logical. His instincts screamed, and he turned just in time to see the betrayal unfold. Fleck, or what was left of him, stood with his weapon trained on Torque, eyes blank, movements mechanical. It was as if his strings had been cut and reattached by some unseen puppeteer. "Fleck, what the hell?" Torque shouted, confusion warring with anger. Jin spun, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Fleck snapped out of it, but the Fleck they knew was gone, replaced by a mindless husk, his allegiance as dead as a politician's promise. The guards seized their chance, moving in with grim efficiency. Torque fought back, desperation lending him strength, but it was like trying to hold back a tsunami with a teacup. Jin was pulled away, her protests lost in the chaos, and Torque felt a sharp sting at the base of his neck. His vision blurred, the world tilting as his limbs grew leaden, and he realized with grim clarity that they had lost this round. Darkness claimed him, and the last thing he remembered was Fleck's vacant gaze watching him fall. Torque awoke to the kind of headache that felt like his brain had been used as a football in an intergalactic derby. He was restrained, the room sterile and devoid of warmth, a fitting purgatory for his brand of bad luck. "Welcome back, Captain," a voice drawled, dripping with insincerity. Torque cracked open his eyes, squinting against the harsh light. A figure loomed above him, all sharp angles and sharper eyes, the kind that promised nothing good. "And you are," Torque managed, his voice hoarse. "Call me Overseer," the man said, as if it were a title he was particularly proud of. "You're in quite the predicament, Captain." "Story of my life," Torque replied, his sarcasm a reflex. "You know, I was planning a nice holiday before you and your goons dropped by." The Overseer chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Your humor's misplaced, Captain." "You're in our hands now." Torque shifted, testing his bonds and finding them disappointingly secure. "So what's the plan? You gonna monologue me to death? I warn you, I've got a short attention span." "Hardly," the Overseer replied, pacing with the kind of self-assured menace that suggested he enjoyed the smell of his own breath. "You're an interesting specimen, Captain. Your resistance to the wave intrigued us." "Well, I'm flattered," Torque said, trying to ignore the growing dread in his gut. "But I'm afraid I don't dance to other people's tunes." The Overseer leaned in, his gaze piercing. "You will, Torque, they all do eventually." Torque met his gaze with defiance, the fire in his heart refusing to be quenched. "I wouldn't count on it. I'm notoriously stubborn. You'll find that we've perfected the art of persuasion," the Overseer said, patting Torque's shoulder with a condescension that made Torque want to bite him. "Good luck with that," Torque replied, forcing a grin. I'm a terrible student. The overseer turned away, signaling to unseen subordinates. Let's see how long you keep that spirit. Torque watched him go, frustration mingling with determination. He was down but not out, never out. And if he had anything to say about it, he'd make sure that whatever came next would be on his terms. Meanwhile, Jin found herself in a similar predicament, albeit with considerably more swearing. She was locked in a cell, the air stale, her mind racing with plans and counterplans. "Well, this is just bloody fantastic," she muttered, pacing the cramped space like a caged predator. "Wake me when the nightmare's over." She cursed Fleck's betrayal, though she knew it wasn't his fault. The mind control wave had taken him, and now they were paying the price. But self-pity wasn't her style. She analyzed the cell, every inch of metal scrutinized for weakness. They might have caught her, but she wasn't about to sit quietly and wait for rescue. She was a warrior, after all. And warriors fought, even when the odds were stacked against them. "Gearbox," she whispered, hoping the AI could still pick up her signal. "You better have a plan." The silence stretched, a tangible weight on her shoulders. But then, like a small spark in the darkness, Gearbox's voice crackled to life. "I'm still online, Jin," it said, voice tinged with the kind of dry wit that suggested it too, didn't know how or when to quit. "And I always have a plan." "Good," Jin replied, allowing herself a small smile. "Because I'm not done fighting yet." Back in his cell, Torque lay still, conserving his energy, his mind working overtime on escape plans. He knew his crew wouldn't give up, and neither would he. They were scattered, vulnerable, and facing overwhelming odds, but they had one thing the enemy didn't: each other. And if that wasn't enough, well, Torque would eat his own sarcasm for breakfast. "Let's see how you like it," Torque whispered to the shadows, defiance in every fiber of his being. The game wasn't over, not while he had breath left in his body. He'd get out, and when he did, the overseer would wish he'd stuck to simpler hobbies, like knitting or stamp collecting. Because if there was one thing Torque was good at, it was turning bad situations into worse situations for everyone else. He closed his eyes, letting the darkness wash over him again, a tactical retreat rather than a surrender. This was just another round, and Torque planned to win the match, one way or another. Torque awoke in the sterile confinement, his head throbbing like he'd headbutted a supernova. The overseer was gone, leaving Torque to stew in his own misery. He imagined the overseer in a different career, like a failed game show host, because hell knew he had the face for it. "Hey, Gearbox," Torque mumbled. "You there?" A pause, then the familiar voice crackled in. "You rang. Captain got plans besides rotting in this cell," would have suggested a luau, but the ambience here is a real killer. Torque chuckled through gritted teeth. "Gotta love your optimism. There's a reason I'm still your AI." Torque shifted, testing his restraints again. They were tighter than his credit line after a night on the space strip. "So, any ideas?" "Well, I considered inviting them to a tea party, but something tells me they're not the crumpet type," Gearbox quipped. Torque sighed. "Guess it's down to the old-fashioned way. Prison break it is. Thought you'd never ask." Meanwhile, in her own joyfully dismal cell, Jin was busy making friends with the walls. "Just you and me, huh?" she said to the metal. "Hope you're not the chatty type." A voice, draped in disinterest, echoed in her ear. "Jin, you're talking to inanimate objects again." Gearbox: "Good to hear your dulcet tones. What's the plan?" "Pray to the god of rust, already scheduled it. Thought we might also try a bit of human ingenuity." Jin smirked, her eyes scanning the cell's every corner. "We've survived worse. Remember the time we outran that warlord with nothing but a spoon and half a plan?" "Ah, nostalgia," Gearbox replied. "Those were the days." Jin started fiddling with her restraints, because why not? They weren't going to detach themselves. She flipped the restraints mechanism with a hairpin she'd hidden in her boot, because even in space, personal grooming had its perks. "You're unusually chipper for someone in space jail," Gearbox noted. "Well, let's just say I'm optimistic about making whoever's responsible for this eat their own shoes. Bold of you to assume they wear any." Jin worked on the restraints, feeling them give way slightly. "How's Torque?" "Alive, against all odds," Gearbox replied. You know, whatever human quirk is keeping you all from being brainwashed, it's not my place to understand it, but I'll support it. Well, it's not exactly rocket science, Jin muttered, finally releasing the last clasp. We're just too stubborn to let anyone control our minds. Meanwhile, in the realm of the not-so-imprisoned, Fleck was having what one might call an out-of-body experience. Not that he'd ever been in control of his body to begin with since his last encounter with the mind control wave. Fleck, a voice said, far more irritating now that it came from inside his own head. Fleck, but the Fleck in question was busy being a passenger in his own body while it did unspeakable things. Even for a man who didn't mind getting his hands dirty, this was a bit much. I'm not mind-controlled, just temporarily displaced. His brain finally responded, trying to sound more in control than he was. Well, your friends are about to play the ultimate game of get out of jail free, the voice taunted. Fleck inwardly groaned. If they're smart, they'll steal the whole damn board. His mind wrestled with the wave, trying to claw back some semblance of control. If he could just get one moment of clarity, one chance to help his crew, he'd take it. It was, after all, his favorite pastime, making a mess of enemy plans. Back in the cells, Torque had managed to get his restraints undone, albeit with less style than he would have liked. He didn't have a hairpin, but a bit of jagged metal from the cot leg did the trick. Resourcefulness was the name of the game. Gearbox, any chance you can kill the lights? Give me a bit of darkness to work with, Torque asked. Always happy to oblige, Captain. Consider it your personal blackout. The lights in the facility flickered, then plunged into darkness. Torque grinned, feeling the shadows wrap around him like an old cloak. He slipped out of the cell, his movements silent and deliberate. Jin was already on the move, meeting him in the corridor. Fancy bumping into you here. Couldn't let you have all the fun, Torque replied, nodding toward the exit. Let's blow this joint. Together, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, every corner a potential ambush. But the guards seemed to have taken a break, probably to polish their egos or drink the Kool-Aid. Jin paused, her ears catching something. You hear that? Torque listened, the faintest sound reaching him, a rhythmic clicking like metal on metal. Sounds like Fleck, or someone winding up a really big toy. They followed the noise, every step bringing them closer to what Torque prayed wasn't some new alien monstrosity. What they found instead was Fleck, standing in the middle of a room, looking like he just danced with a hurricane. Fleck, Jin approached cautiously, ready to duck if he decided to go full puppet on them. Fleck blinked as if waking from a dream. Oh hey, thought you'd never get here. Torque, never one to waste a good opportunity, grinned. We missed your charming face. Ready to get out of here, Fleck rubbed his temples, the haze in his mind lifting. You know, this day has been far too long already. Let's wrap it up. Reunited, the trio made their way toward the Misfortune Cookie, the ship that had somehow become their reluctant chariot through hell. As they reached the docking bay, Gearbox's voice filled the comms. I've got the ship ready, but we've got incoming. Enemy reinforcements, and they're not coming for tea, Torque cursed under his breath. Figures they'd throw a welcoming party. The trio raced across the bay, avoiding blaster fire that painted the walls with vivid reminders of mortality. But Torque was in his element. If there was one thing he loved, it was a last-minute escape. Jin covered their rear, her aim precise, each shot buying them precious seconds. Fleck, now fully in control, had a mischievous glint in his eye. Watch this, he said, tossing a grenade over his shoulder. The explosion rocked the bay, sending debris and guards flying. Torque didn't bother looking back. He knew a good distraction when he saw one. Nice throw, Torque remarked as they boarded the Misfortune Cookie. Years of practice, Fleck replied, settling into his seat. Inside the ship, everything was a controlled chaos of alarms and flashing lights. Perfectly in line with their brand of disaster. Gearbox, get us out of here. Torque barked, slamming into the captain's chair. With pleasure. Next stop, anywhere but here, Gearbox replied, activating the engines. The Misfortune Cookie shuddered, then leapt into space, leaving the facility and its mind-controlling ilk in the dust. Torque let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Everyone intact?" he asked, checking over his shoulder. Jin nodded, reloading her weapon for good measure. "Intact but not unscathed. We've got more company on the way." Torque looked at the sensors, watching as more blips closed in. "Of course we do. Why make it easy?" Fleck leaned back, a glint of mischief still in his eye. "I say we give them a welcome they won't forget." Torque considered it, a plan forming. "Gearbox, how's our payload?" "Locked and loaded, Captain." "Perfect," Torque said, his mind racing. "Let's turn this chase into a wild goose chase." The misfortune cookie twisted and turned, outmaneuvering the pursuing ships with a grace that belied its patchwork repair job. Torque's hands flew over the controls, each movement precise and deliberate. "Deploy the decoys," he ordered. Gearbox complied, releasing a cluster of drones that mirrored the ship's signature. The pursuing ships hesitated, splitting their focus between multiple targets. "That'll buy us some time," Jin said, a rare smile playing on her lips. "Not much, but enough," Torque replied, his eyes fixed on the void ahead. Fleck, ever the optimist, leaned forward. "Got any more tricks up your sleeve?" "Oh, plenty," Torque said, confidence lacing his words. "And if all else fails, we wing it." With their pursuers momentarily distracted, the crew of the misfortune cookie made their escape. But they knew it was only a matter of time before the overseer and his forces regrouped. They needed a plan, and fast. "Gearbox, open a channel. We need to reach out to our contacts," Torque said. "Already on it, Captain. Sending out a message now." Jin and Fleck shared a look, their minds already working on the next step. They'd been running for too long, reacting instead of acting. It was time to take the fight back to their enemies. Torque leaned back, the weight of their situation pressing down on him, yet he felt a flicker of hope. They had each other, and that was something the mind control wave couldn't touch. If humanity had a superpower, it was the ability to adapt, to fight back when the odds were stacked against them. "Ready for round two?" Torque asked, a fierce determination in his eyes. "Always," Jin replied, her grip on her weapon steady. "Bring it on," Fleck added, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. As the misfortune cookie sped into the depths of space, Torque knew they were far from out of the woods. But if they could find a way to turn their unique human stubbornness into a weapon, they might just stand a chance. And if nothing else, they'd go down swinging, which was exactly how Captain Ryland Torque liked it. With any luck, they'd make the overseer regret ever tangling with them. Because when humanity fought back, it fought dirty. As the misfortune cookie hurtled through the black maw of space, Captain Ryland Torque sat in his chair, rubbing his temples like a man who'd just discovered his vacation was canceled due to an asteroid storm. Not that he'd ever had a vacation. He stole a glance at Jin and Fleck, who were busy discussing whether they'd prefer to be captured by space pirates or forced to join a boy band. Jin was leaning towards the former, claiming she preferred a chance to keep her dignity intact. "What's the plan, Captain?" Fleck asked, leaning back in his chair with a grin that could only be described as dangerously optimistic. "Plan," Torque pretended to think. "Well, the plan is not to die, which, considering our track record, makes it a pretty ambitious plan." "Yeah, because ambitious plans have worked so well for us in the past," Jin snorted, checking her weapon's charge for the umpteenth time. Torque leaned forward, serious for once. "We need to hit the source of the mind control wave." "Gearbox, any ideas on where that might be?" "If I had to guess," Gearbox said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "I'd say it's not in the gift shop." "Helpful as ever," Torque muttered. "But seriously, any leads?" "I've been intercepting some signals," Gearbox replied. "The brain-frying variety. They're coming from a station orbiting an uninhabited planet not too far from here." "Uninhabited, huh?" "Probably because all the inhabitants took one look at the neighbors and decided to move," Fleck quipped. "Sounds like our kind of place," Torque said. "Let's pay it a visit. Jin, plot a course." As Jin punched in the coordinates, Torque couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and excitement. Sure, they were flying into what was likely a trap designed by a megalomaniac with too much time on his hands, but at least it wasn't another Tuesday. The misfortune cookie arrived at the bleak planet, the station looming like a hangover you couldn't shake. The crew stared at it on the screen, a patchwork of metal and misery, the kind of design only the clinically depressed could love. "Looks welcoming," Jin said dryly. Torque nodded, like a hug from a cactus. "Let's dock." "Docking procedure initiated," Gearbox announced. "I hope you all enjoy the complimentary paranoia." Torque shot Gearbox a look. "Yeah, we'll be sure to leave a review." The docking clamps locked into place with a shudder, like the station itself was having second thoughts about hosting unwanted guests. Torque signaled to his crew and they disembarked, weapons at the ready and jokes at the tips of their tongues. Inside, the station was a monument to bad decisions and worse lighting, the kind of place that would make a prison cell feel like a five-star resort. Flickering lights cast long shadows that seemed to whisper about forgotten terrors. Fleck shook his head, smirking. "I've seen abandoned fast food joints with more life," Jin snorted. "Not much to brag about." Torque led the way, the corridors twisting like a labyrinth designed by someone who hated straight lines. As they moved deeper, the oppressive atmosphere pressed down, a reminder that the mind control wave might still be lurking. They reached a control room, Gearbox's voice crackling over their comms. "This is the source, Captain. All the signals are routed through here." "Let's shut it down," Torque said. Jin and Fleck moved to the control panels, their fingers dancing over the keys as if they were cracking the code to the universe's worst-kept secret. The room hummed with energy, the kind that made your hair stand on end and your gut clench with anticipation. "Almost there," Jin murmured, her focus sharp. The door slid open, revealing a group of guards who looked like they'd been pulled from a bad action movie. Menacing, sure, but with just enough incompetence to make you wonder how they remembered to breathe. Fleck grinned. "I was starting to think this was going to be easy." "Easy's not in our vocabulary," Torque retorted, raising his weapon. The ensuing firefight was loud, messy, and exactly what Torque needed to clear his head. Blaster fire crisscrossed the room, painting it with brief, deadly strokes of light. Jin and Fleck moved like dancers on a stage, each shot a calculated step in their deadly ballet. Torque felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the kind that reminded him he was alive, whether he liked it or not. "Gearbox, any chance you can speed this up?" "Working on it, Captain," Gearbox replied, a hint of impatience in its tone. "Try not to get shot in the meantime." "Helpful advice," Torque quipped, ducking behind a console as a shot whizzed past. With a final keystroke, Jin initiated the shutdown sequence. The room shuddered, the hum of the mind control machinery dying like a monster being put out of its misery. "Got it," Jin announced, satisfaction in her voice. "About time," Fleck added, taking a moment to catch his breath. The guards, now without their mental crutches, looked around in confusion, their mind control ties severed. Torque took a moment to appreciate the irony, freedom delivered in the form of chaos. "Let's get the hell out of here," Torque said, leading the way back to the misfortune cookie. As they sprinted through the station, the corridors seemed less intimidating, the shadows merely shadows. Torque felt a strange sense of triumph, the kind that came from knowing they'd stuck it to the overseer and his mind-bending plans. Back on the ship, they launched into space, the station receding behind them like a bad dream finally fading. Torque slumped in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "Good work, everyone," he said, his tone a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Now let's make sure we never have to do that again." "Seconded," Jin said, settling into her seat. Fleck chuckled. "Already planning our next disaster, Captain," Torque sighed, a wry smile on his lips. "What else is new?" As the misfortune cookie sailed into the void, Torque allowed himself a moment of peace. They'd taken a stand, fought back against the odds, and come out on the other side, battered, bruised, but unbroken. And in the end, wasn't that what being human was all about? Fighting, surviving, and occasionally laughing in the face of the universe's worst intentions. Torque couldn't help but think they might just have a future after all, even if it was a future filled with more questionable decisions and ill-advised adventures. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Captain Ryland Torque reclined in his command chair on the misfortune cookie, feeling a bit like a dog with a bone it didn't know what to do with. They'd shut down the mind control wave, but instead of a parade or at least a thanks for not letting us become lobotomized drones, the universe had repaid them with silence. He wasn't sure if he felt more relieved or disappointed. One thing was for sure, though. They'd survived, and in this line of work, that was practically a bloody miracle. Feels weird, doesn't it? Jin said, leaning against a console with her arms crossed, a practiced nonchalance that came naturally to someone who'd seen too many things to bother caring. What? The complete lack of explosions and people trying to kill us. Torque replied, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, it's unnerving. Don't worry, the universe will correct itself soon enough, Gearbox chimed in. Probably with a meteor shower or spontaneous combustion. Well, isn't that a cheery thought, Fleck added, his dangerously optimistic grin making its usual appearance. You'd almost think we're on the verge of something good. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Torque said, scratching his chin as if it might reveal the secrets of the universe. We've done what we set out to do. Now, it's about getting back to Earth without being turned into cosmic debris. Sounds like a plan, Jin said, rolling her shoulders. Though with our luck, someone'll find a way to screw it up. Can't argue with you there, Torque said, tapping a few buttons on his console to get the ship oriented. Gearbox, plot a course back to Earth, and try to avoid any black holes or intergalactic traffic jams. Right away, Captain, Gearbox replied, its synthetic voice managing to sound mildly sarcastic. I'll also keep an eye out for space hitchhikers and rogue asteroids. Torque chuckled despite himself. It was moments like these that reminded him why he kept going, why he hadn't jettisoned himself into the nearest sun. His crew was dysfunctional, sure, but they were his dysfunctional crew, and you couldn't put a price on that. Well, maybe you could, but it'd probably be more than he could afford. The misfortune cookie aligned itself for the journey home, the ship's engines humming to life with a sound that was less of a roar and more of a disgruntled grumble. Torque imagined it was complaining about being woken up from a nap. So, we're really doing this, huh? Fleck asked, his eyes scanning the stars that stretched endlessly before them. Looks like it, Torque replied, leaning back in his chair, feeling the weight of 1,000 unwritten space operas. Jin sighed, a hint of resignation in her demeanor. I suppose we'll have to figure out what to do with all this free time. Maybe we could write a book, Fleck suggested loftily. How to Not Die in Space. A guide for the unfortunate. Pretty sure there's no market for that, Jin said dryly. Most people would prefer to avoid the situations we find ourselves in, Torque smirked. But if there was a market, we'd be rolling in credits. The ship's interior was quiet save for the hum of the engines and the occasional beep of a console. It was peaceful in a way that was alien to them, a peace that felt temporary and fragile, like a soap bubble drifting through a minefield. So what did we learn? Torque asked, breaking the silence. Other than the fact that mind control waves are bad for your health, that even when we think we're screwed, we somehow manage to pull through, Jin said, a thoughtful expression on her face. Yeah, but let's not make a habit of it, Fleck added. I'd prefer a little less excitement next time, Torque chuckled. I think we can all agree on that. But hey, at least we proved that humanity isn't completely hopeless. That's the spirit, Captain, Gearbox said, its voice laced with what Torque imagined was the robot equivalent of a wink. All we need now is a rousing anthem and a montage of our greatest hits. You volunteering to write it? Torque asked, grinning. I'll leave the creative endeavors to you fleshbags, Gearbox replied. I'll stick to keeping us alive, thank you very much. The trip back to Earth was uneventful, a string of empty space punctuated only by the occasional asteroid field and the distant glimmer of stars. It gave Torque time to think, to reflect on what they'd accomplished and what it all meant. The crew gathered in the common area, a place that hadn't seen much use since they'd been too busy trying not to die. The room was small and cluttered, but it was theirs, a little slice of chaos in a universe that seemed hell-bent on destruction. So, what are we going to do when we get back? Jin asked, leaning back in her chair, her feet propped up on the table. Find the nearest pub, I reckon, Torque said, his eyes twinkling. A drink or 10 sounds like just what the doctor ordered, and after that, Fleck asked, his tone bordering on serious. After that we keep going, Torque said with a shrug. We keep fighting, keep surviving, because that's what we do. Jin nodded, satisfied with the answer. Yeah, I suppose that's enough. And maybe we'll even get a vacation, Fleck added, his grin wider than ever. Assuming we can afford it, Torque said. But honestly, what's the point of saving the universe if you can't take a break every now and then? The misfortune cookie re-entered Earth's atmosphere with all the grace of a drunken swan, the ship shuddering as it descended through the clouds. It wasn't pretty, but they'd never been about style points. I think I'm going to miss this hunk of junk, Jin said, gazing at the console with something almost resembling affection. Don't worry, Torque said, patting the console. We'll be back out there soon enough, making questionable decisions and narrowly avoiding death. You make it sound so romantic, Fleck said, rolling his eyes. Space is romantic, Torque replied, in the sense that it'll probably kill you if you let your guard down. The ship touched down, the landing smoother than expected, a minor miracle in a day full of them. Torque powered down the engines, the hum fading into silence. They'd done it. They'd survived. And for a bunch of screw-ups in a second-hand ship, that was something to be proud of. So, where to now? Jin asked as they exited the ship, the familiar sight of Earth stretching out before them. Home, Torque said, the word feeling strange and comforting on his tongue. For now, anyway. He looked at his crew, his family, really, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun on his face. They'd done the impossible, faced down the worst the universe had to offer and come out the other side. Together. Torque paused, taking in the view, the vast sky above them, the ground solid beneath their feet. It was a reminder that no matter how far they traveled, no matter how many stars they passed, they always had a place to return to. Here's to the next adventure, Fleck said, raising an imaginary glass. To us, Jin added, a small smile playing on her lips. And to the misfortune cookie, Torque finished, feeling a swell of pride that had nothing to do with their recent victory and everything to do with the people standing beside him. They stood there for a moment, a ragtag group of misfits in the shadow of a ship that had carried them through hell and back. And for the first time in a long time, Torque felt at peace. Because no matter what the universe threw at them next, he knew they'd face it together, with a laugh and a raised middle finger. And really, wasn't that what life was all about?